Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our online workshop, and thank you so much for joining us today. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Omar Ali from the comms team at Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce. Today, we will be exploring how we are embracing sustainable digital innovation to drive forward our strategic vision through net zero digital initiative. Through this presentation, we aim to highlight the Chamber's effort in adopting global environment and digital sustainability standards, alongside fostering key economic and community partnerships. Now, I will hand the floor to my colleague Farah to start the workshop. We hope this session will give you valuable insights and practical information that you can apply in the future. Thank you again for being with us today, and we look forward to a productive and engaging workshop. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this morning. I'm really excited to see so many of you here. So today we're going to talk about digital sustainability and how it can help your business. Sustainability is a really broad subject, and so is the digital aspect of it. So today we're looking specifically at websites and their impact, and how you can work with that. Amar, if you can just take us down to slide 4, I think. Yeah, great. So we're an agency that makes sustainable and accessible websites and applications, and our aim is to work towards a greener internet and putting people and the planet first. Next slide. In alignment with Abu Dhabi's government and the ADCCI's forward-thinking vision for sustainability, Hertech is helping businesses advance their positive impact. So what do I mean by that? The problem that we're facing right now is the environmental impact of websites. As you know, websites sit on data centers, so every website sits on a server somewhere. And collectively, if we look at all the websites around the world, the energy consumption that they take up is equivalent to Denmark, and actually now becoming more like the equivalent to France. It's moving up to that degree. And if you think about the carbon emissions, so all the carbon that they produce, these data centers, that's equivalent to the footprint of the entire aviation industry. So just think about that. If we break it down into one web page, then we look at we're still on the slide before, Omar. So if we look at that in a single web page, the carbon footprint of one web page, as it loads, say that for 10,000 monthly visitors, is equivalent to driving a car for 1,000 kilometers. That's just one web page with 10,000 monthly visits, which we all know is not that much for a larger sized company. So these are the kind of silent stats that no one talks about. We know the aviation industry emits a huge amount of carbon. We know countries do too, but nobody talks about the carbon emissions of the internet as a single unit. So next slide. So how do we look at that economic impact to businesses? If you have a larger website that has a lot of data and houses a lot of images and videos and whatnot, then that means that it's using more energy to transfer that from the server to the devices of people. So that's higher energy consumption. And that's also down to costs. And so if everybody has big websites, lots of energy being consumed, eventually the hosting providers will pass that cost down to businesses. The second point, and it's a really important one, is slow performance. As you know, websites that are full of useless code, lots of images, videos, whatnot, they don't perform well. They perform poorly. And you know that consumers click off your website in the first 3 seconds if it doesn't fully load. So you're also losing that kind of traffic. Sustainable websites aim to load in fractions of a second, and it's sort of a byproduct of being sustainable. The other thing is SEO penalties. Google and all other search engines favor and prioritize fast and efficient websites. So non-sustainable websites rank lower in search results, and they reduce your visibility and further impact your revenue. A fourth point, which a lot of people don't think about, is regulatory risks. So governments are increasingly focusing, and as you can see with the Abu Dhabi government, it's doing the same. They're focusing more on sustainability, and businesses running inefficient websites could face new regulations coming up. And compliance with these regulations could require significant investment in redesigning websites, upgrading their infrastructure, or even paying fines, which we'll talk about in a little while. So again, that increases the overall cost of doing business. Also, websites that are not built sustainably require frequent updates, could require redesigns to improve their efficiency. And so the idea here is if you're thinking right now about developing a new website or redeveloping the one you have, it's a good thing to think about sustainability when you do so and factor that into the objectives of the site. Another thing is investors and consumers. I mean, most of you are here today because you're interested in the idea of digital sustainability and have heard about sustainability in general. It's a buzzword, everybody's talking about it. So it's become an important thing to investors and consumers. They value it more. They have more loyalty towards organizations that make it part of their vision and mission statement. And so companies associated with high carbon emissions could suffer reputational damage, and that could lead to a loss of consumer loyalty or decreased investor interest, which consequently has an impact on stock prices and sales and whatnot. Also, it means that you're kind of stagnating innovation-wise, right? So if you're always ahead of the curve, you're always focusing on the newest emerging technologies and concepts and ideas. And I don't want to call this a trend because this isn't a trend. This is a protection for the planet and our people and for the future. Um, but thinking about these things being the first one, that always at the pioneer and at the forefront, is again a really important thing to stay ahead of your competitors and also seem attractive to consumers and investors. It also helps you open up new markets and opportunities for growth. So yeah, that's the economic impact to businesses that is at the forefront. But let's talk about what digital sustainability is. Like, what exactly are we talking about here? Next slide. So digital sustainability is the practice of designing, developing, and deploying digital technologies and services in a way that minimizes their environmental impact and contributes positively to sustainability goals. So what, in a nutshell, that means is it's a website that's good for the planet, it's good for business, and it's good for the user. That's a sustainable website. Now, websites, next slide, please, are made up of three core components, websites and applications. The three components are: how are they powered, how are they designed and built, and who uses them? So you've got these three main elements. Let's dive into each one. So the first one is power. So websites, like we said, are hosted on servers that need energy to power and cool them, right? Because they need a huge amount of cooling, not only powering. And so what we do is we supply green hosting, and green hosting runs on 100% clean renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, or geothermal power. So instead of cooling them through, the more kind of traditional ways of coal or nuclear or a mix of many types of energy sources, this is 100% renewable. So it cools and powers it with that. All websites are hosted on a server somewhere, and by moving them to green hosting, it's the easiest, quickest, and most affordable way for your organization to have a positive impact and decrease carbon emissions immediately. So that's the first component. The second component is design. And it's a really, really important one because, next slide, please. Sustainable websites are designed and built to be efficient in every way. So what does that mean? The first point is minimalist design. So the idea here is that what we mean by minimalist design is you want to get a user from point A to point B in the fastest way possible with the least friction possible, so they can get to where they want to go on your site really easily, and they can see that journey right in front of them as soon as they land on your homepage or even a different page on the site. So the navigation needs to be really great. The call out boxes need to be really efficient. And what that does is that means that the person is spending less time searching for stuff on your site and lost on the site, which means that they're loading less pages on the site. So the less pages they load, the more sustainable that journey was, okay? So implementing minimalist design approach to reduce high resolution images, videos, intensive media, and that increased data transfer and energy consumption. So there are two factors there, right? So creating a good user experience and really thinking about what kind of content you put on your site. The second point is modular designs. What we mean by modular is it's easy to update or modify without requiring a complete redesign, right? So this approach allows for scalability and an expansion of the website without needing to redevelop it. What do I mean here? So think about modular, when you think about modular, you think about blocks. So taking different blocks like drag and drop builders or taking blocks and putting them around, but without using the conventional drag and drop plugins that are out there, which are very, very energy consuming. They're very heavy, they're bloated with code. No, we build sites that are completely modular in the sense that you can easily take components, create new pages, which means that the site grows with you. It scales with you as you pivot maybe your concept, you have new product, you're easily able to create these new pages on your site without any help from anyone. And that's an interesting modern approach to the way that websites are now designed. And one you need to think about if you want to redesign your website at some point, say, hey, this is something that I want. I want a modular website. The third point is optimization. So a lot of times you hear, oh, we need to optimize the site. We need to increase its optimization. Why? Because it minimizes redundancy and it allows for websites to operate more efficiently with less bandwidth. So optimized websites perform better due to reduced server strain and improved coding. And again, optimization is so key to a sustainable website because the more websites are optimized, the better they perform, the more sustainable they are. And that brings us to our fourth point, which is efficient coding. Of course, for a website to be optimized, to have a modular design, to be minimalist, it also needs to be efficiently coded. And so that allows for good resource management. It makes them more scalable and easier to maintain. It also means that it gives them a higher long-term viability. So your website stays with you for many, many years, as opposed to one that you need to renew and update more often. So the third component we're going to look at is users. So the users are a really, really important part of the site. Next slide, please. Amar? Thank you. So users are, of course, the people who come to your website to use it, whether they're on mobile or desktop or laptops or whatever device they have. And mobile optimization here is key. And we don't mean just resizing for mobile or creating a responsive site for mobile. It means optimizing the site for mobile. So allowing for users to use less data when they're downloading a page from your site. So when they're viewing a page, they view it and they don't consume as much data on their 4G or 5G phones, right? This helps you increase user base and include a wider demographic in countries where there's high mobile usage. So there are countries where people don't really use laptops or desktops very often. They're always on their mobiles. So imagine cumulatively, if your website is using low data for every page load, how much you're eventually saving in terms of kilograms of carbon emissions per year. The second point, and that brings us to this concept now soon of compliance, is accessibility. What do I mean by accessibility? Accessibility ensures that all individuals, regardless of their physical or cognitive abilities, such as not being able to hear well or not being able to see well or being a bit older, they're able to access and interact with your web content the same way as somebody who doesn't have any issues can. So this promotes social equality, it promotes inclusiveness, and it's a key aspect of sustainable development. For example, this would be very beneficial to um, people in the medical industry, in government, all service providers. This is something that they think about. And even the ADCCI has a whole accessibility section on their website. So if you look at the bottom, you can see that there are kind of tools that help with accessibility. And that ties into compliance. Like right now, web accessibility is regulated and is mandated in the US and EU, right? So in the US, it's ties into the Disabilities Act, and then the EU with the Union's Web Accessibility Directive. And companies are being fined and sued if they don't comply with accessibility at the moment. So it's become suddenly a big thing that everybody's scrambling to make sure they're compliant, that their websites are accessible, and it's a rush to get that done. Now, web sustainability is following suit. So right now, all the laws and the sort of guidelines around web sustainability are being created. And I'm part of the wider group that's working on that. So we're creating all these guidelines that eventually will be vetted by government and become regulation and then become a required compliance. So we're moving towards that, and it would be a smart thing from now to start thinking about these things for your own organization. And again, these things all tie together. So corporate responsibility, I mean, organizations now, companies now are really thinking a lot about corporate social responsibility. They're thinking about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance as well, and all the UN regulations. So it's becoming, again, a forefront thing. There are accreditations that are tied into this, that everybody, sort of larger organizations are already actioning. And apart from being regulation, it's also an ethical responsibility. So it's one that you should think about from an ethical perspective. And also, again, it helps enhance reputation. It helps foster trust with audiences, and an amazing marketing tool. So that kind of explains what digital sustainability is and the components of how it's come together. And it brings us to a really, really another important point that is connected to this, which is greenwashing. So next slide, please. I hope everybody's followed with us so far. Give us a thumbs up if you're kind of understand the concept so far of digital sustainability. Great. Okay, so let's move into greenwashing then. Greenwashing. Thanks, everyone. That's very comforting to know. Great. So let's move into a little bit more complex side of the presentation. So the point here of greenwashing is that digital in the context of digital sustainability, greenwashing refers to the practice where organizations misrepresent or exaggerate their environmental efforts to appear more eco-friendly than they actually are, right? So greenwashing is pretending to do the work without actually doing it, because there's so much economic gain that comes from appearing to be environmentally conscious and proactive that many companies just jump and say, yep, we're environmentally friendly, we do follow environmental practices, but actually they're not implementing anything that's genuinely and genuinely impactful. Okay, so how do we avoid greenwashing? There are 4 kind of pillars to that. The first one is transparent reporting. So full disclosure, have in your footer, like we were talking about accessibility being now a common link in the footers of many websites, talking about how their website is accessible. Talk about how you're sustainable, but of course only do that when you've taken sustainability steps. But you can have a link in your footer that talks about the verifiable information about your environmental impacts and sustainability efforts. Don't forget to shout about these things. Be proud of them. They're an amazing marketing tool. But also be open to third-party audits, right? So make sure that you engage with independent organizations to audit and verify sustainability claims that can enhance credibility. So for example, we're something called B Corp certified, right? So we have a B Corp certification, and that is a verification process that we went through to ensure that when we said we were environmentally positive and we have a positive impact on planet and world and people, that we were saying the truth. And we went through a rigorous process to do it. So that's just an example of how to be audited. The second point is adopt real sustainable practices. So again, a quick win we were talking about was renewable energy. So, but renewable energy can go past just hosting your website. It can go into other digital infrastructures. It can go into your supply chain, powering your offices, powering your kind of vehicles if you had logistics and stuff like that. So think about it in a broader sense of using renewable energy infrastructures. Thinking about things like life cycle analysis. So the entire life cycle of a digital product or service from development to disposal. So, we think about, for example, the life cycle of devices, right? So we think about how long can I keep my laptop? How long can I keep my phone without needing to go and get the newest one or the latest one? That is thinking about positive environmental impact. But also think about it in the sense of a website, right? How much power and time and cost it takes to create a website. If you don't think about sustainability, right, then how are we going to then and how it's being built? Then you're building a website a few times over. That's also not a sustainable approach, right? I saw someone ask about scope 3 emissions. So it's really hard right now to think about digital sustainability in the sphere of scope 3. Why? So you can evaluate your own website. But for example, if you were an agency or something like that that works with other organizations, so you're also involved in the building or the creation of their websites, that's very hard to quantify. But of your own website, we're going to look at that in our next slide. And I'm going to show you how we're able to calculate your own emissions. But no, we're not there yet. Sorry, Ahmad. I was just saying that that's something we're going to look at in a minute. So another third point is standardized certification. So recognize standards like using well-known credible environmental standards such as ISO 14001 for environmental management systems. And again, those are the kind of wider accreditations that organizations are getting to kind of hit their ESG targets, and always having clear criteria. So ensuring the criteria for these certifications are transparent and rigorous and not easy to attain. So not just these quick wins, but also going in depth and really doing the harder work. And the fourth point, which is a really, really kind of one that gets organizations excited, is consumer engagement and education. So create awareness campaigns around this. Educate your consumers, educate your stakeholders, talk to them about what constitutes genuine sustainability and how to recognize greenwashing. Have that as part of your comms, right? And also have feedback mechanisms for them. So create clear channels for consumers to report misleading claims and practices. So again, that ties into transparent reporting, ties into your certifications, and so this is all sort of a loop of things that you can do together to really avoid greenwashing and work towards getting accredited for it, right? So how do we look at calculating impact? Next slide, please. So we've got these mechanisms that help calculate impact, and we have what's called an impact report, right? So what we do is we run an audit. It's a non-invasive remote audit that creates baseline data to use as a benchmark for improvements, right? So we do it remotely, where we don't kind of go into your systems or anything like that. We have the URLs of your websites, and we're able to create a sort of a benchmark report out of that. We analyze and break down this data in a digestible form. And from it, we're able to create a bespoke data-driven plan with clear objectives. We prioritize key areas of development within time and budget restrictions that you may have to maximize the impact that we can contribute. And then once we are happy with that, we implement it, right? So we migrate to green hosting, but then we also have practical implementations of this plan that we've created based on the impact report. Once it's implemented, we then go back and we re-audit. And then we are able to compare the new report to the original one, and we can see how much improvement we've created. And then again, that report can go into your wider efforts for calculating scope 3 emissions and your certifications, but also can go towards your marketing efforts and on your website saying that, you know, we've improved the sustainability of our own website. How do we calculate that? Next slide. So I talked a little bit about page loads and page weights, and that's a really important part of how to calculate carbon emissions. So what we do is we calculate the page weight first, right? And page weight is made up of all the videos, the code, the scripts, as you can see there. So you've got images, scripts, HTML and CSS and other factors. We calculate how much data they take, and then we multiply that by the amount of times that particular page is being visited, and that gives us the page's emissions, right? So we calculate the page load, and then we try and reduce that page load. So here we can see on the left that this website's emissions are about 0.37, which is great. Like, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And this is a website that has a lot of images, a lot of, it's got interaction. So it's not a website that's just text. Like, it's not Google search. You know, Google search is probably around, I think, 0.1 maybe. So, and most websites are, the good ones are at 0.8 grams, but then we're talking about one point something, 1.6, 1.1. And if we think about even a website that's at 0.8 grams, okay, which is not bad, not great, but not bad, at 10,000 monthly views, the single page, it creates 100 kilograms of CO2 per year. So when we shave off even incremental amounts, we take that 0.8, make it 0.7 or 0.5, we're reducing kilos and kilos and tons, consequently, of carbon emissions per year per organization. So there's a real impact there, even by shaving a little bit of the weight of each page. So let's look at how we reduce CO2. How do we work with this? Next slide, please. So the things we do are optimizing media. Like we just talked about, we reduce the overall page weight, we remove unused code, we properly size images, and a really big one that people oversee is reducing the impact of third-party code and plugins. So really easy to kind of bring in a plugin, add a functionality to your site because you want to do something new or great, cool with your website or whatever it may be, or you need some practical tool that helps you with something like booking or whatever, and that originally wasn't coded on your website. So you bring in a third-party plugin and you put it in, and that is probably one of the biggest negatives to sustainability that you can do, just piling in, because we don't vet third-party code. We don't know what these third-party developers have done or created or coded on their own plugins, right? But you're bringing that into your own site and you're using that on your own site. So then that becomes part of your ecosystem. So you have to be really careful about what you bring in and instead try and code a lot of these things directly into the site. Another factor we look at, next slide, please, is like we talked about, which is design, right? So in design, we think about things like improving page rendering and interactions, optimizing content for search engines, improving accessibility, using efficient cache delivery networks, so your CDNs, using good CDNs, and reducing server requests. And last but not least is to use green hosting. So these are the kind of pillars through which we work to reduce and make a website that exists more sustainable, and then a website that built from scratch using all of these kind of guidelines and policies. So yeah, that's kind of how we measure impact and create these reports that you can take away and use and then kind of re-audit later, and also maintain this sustainability, because we can make your website sustainable one day, and then you can go and use practices that aren't sustainable, like, again, go and load a bunch of images without looking at their sizes, without caring about their format, putting videos on, and suddenly your website went from being really sustainable to not, right? So let's look at, so we talked about what it is, green digital sustainability, what the negative impact was, to not being sustainable, how to avoid greenwashing, how to calculate the CO2 emissions of your site. So now let's look at the benefits. Next slide, please. Here we've just got a couple of, we can't go across all industries, but we sort of picked a few that we know were present today, and wanted to just kind of give you examples of industry specific benefits that come with green hosting and a sustainable website. So in construction, it would help you meet your ESG goals. It's a powerful marketing tool, so website becomes sustainability showcase in efforts to curb negative environmental impact caused through construction. With retail and e-commerce, I mean, the benefits of sustainability are endless. It increases performance, leading to higher traffic and reduced bounce rate. It allows for a revision of user journeys to create better checkout experiences. It's improved SEO and improved mobile optimization, which results in a wider demographic, which we were talking about earlier. Healthcare and services sector, it's creating quick, easy, minimal user experiences that are essential on these types of websites. It's accessibility compliance, which is a must, really. Sustainable websites and accessible ones allow for better types of data collection. They're also built more securely, so it's an automatic improvement on the website. And they have low data usage and they're fast loading, which increases conversions. So thinking about someone that's going to come to a website, a healthcare website or a services one, maybe usually if we think about the user in an empathetic way, they're worried, they're scared, they want to get to something really quickly. So this is it's an important part of having a minimal user experience for them to be able to get to from point A to point B really quickly. With financial, we talked about compliance and regulation. They're a must for financial institutions, and it's become a more and more kind of a given that you are regulated. Sustainable investing as an industry in itself is growing, and it's got a loyal following, and a lot of kind of consumers and investors come to financial firms and say, do you have sustainable investing as part of your portfolio? Right? So greenwashing consequently is not tolerated by these people because they're coming specifically to look for a more sustainable approach to their investing. And so lastly, it becomes a really important tool that can be leveraged. Next slide, please. So really, there are no downsides to incorporating a digital sustainability plan. It helps with cost in the long run. It helps with speed and performance, with compliance, with bolstering your reputation, with increasing transparency, with helping you with your brand image if you're kind of doing a rebrand or you're moving towards becoming a more sustainable or environmentally conscious company. So this helps with that. It's an innovative approach. Right now, it's part of your innovation efforts. It creates reliable data and improves your KPIs. It helps with website longevity, so your website can stay with you much longer. Also helps with its flexibility and helping it scale with you as you grow. And all of these are really attractive to investors. So yeah, there are a lot of positives there. So if there's something that, next slide, please. If there's something that you heard here today that you'd like more information about, or you think there's a key area you need more help with, please scan this QR code or visit this link to get in touch, and we'd be happy to provide more detailed information from there and get back in touch with you. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. I can see there were a few comments, so let's move on to Q&A and have a chat around this this topic and this subject. Let's pop into the chat and have a look at. So the first one, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the claps. So the first one was a message around, is this issue regulated on a government level? No, we answered that question later on. It's not yet. Accessibility has in sort of the Western Hemisphere has become a regulated thing, but digital sustainability, web sustainability is following suit. We are working on that right now. When we touch on cost, can you please give a hint of how much is yearly cost for green webs? Okay. So it's not okay. So hosting in general has a huge variety, right? So you can have hosting for maybe 20 dirhams a month, and you can have hosting for 1,000 dirhams a month, right? So, depending on the size of your organization, depending on your company, its website and its need for resources, but often, more often than not, what you're going to get for 20 dirhams very wildly differs, for example, from what you'd get for 100 dirhams or 120 dirhams a month, right? So for 100, 120, if you're a smaller website, and by small, I don't mean really, really small, like a one pager, but a few pages. So a portfolio talking about your website, what it offers, what not. At about 100, 120, you're looking at a website that is powered by a completely different type of server, green hosted server, but also really secure. Has an amazing content delivery network, which means that it loads faster. It doesn't, it loads from geographically specific areas if you're kind of serving a more international international audience. And it's secure. So it really places a huge emphasis on security and malware removal. And so there are a lot of benefits that come from going from that price point to something around 20 to something around 100, 120 dirhams, right? So that's kind of the cost of a starting point, I would say, for green hosting. But like I said, it comes with a huge amount of benefits as well. It's not just about green hosting. What are recommendations to manage scope 3 emissions, which are the hardest to manage? Yes, they are. So with websites, and that's why I kind of introduced our talk today to be specific about websites, because even forget about sustainability as a whole, but digital sustainability is huge. Like we were saying, you've got it can be controlled across devices, infrastructures, internal infrastructures of companies, internal servers, and that's something that we can't manage. But what we can manage, as you can see, is the calculation of your scope emissions of the website itself. We've now got these tools that help us calculate that. Look, it's not a strict science. It's also being improved year on year. So much has changed from when we started calculating website emissions to today, right? So it's a developing sector. But at least you have some data that you can take away and make improvements on. The improvements are real. Even if the data is not exact, you can see that we went from 0.8 to 0.7 to 0.6, and that's real. That's an improvement. And that's what you can take away and say, hey, these are things that we've done, right? What most IT part that consumes more electricity? Power servers? Yes, so that's a really good question. The biggest and part of IT is the servers, because all the data sits on the servers, right? The second most important thing is the electricity grid, so the grid at which it's running. If it's going from point A, like think about a car. If a car goes from point A to point B in the most direct route, then it's using the least amount of petrol and energy, right? But if it's being routed through so many different grids, going left and right, and then that takes up a lot more energy. But at its core, at the server where it's being powered and where it's being saved and cooled is the most important one now that we can tackle, because we can control that. We can't really control the grid yet. We can control our routers. PCs is a sort of a secondary thing. I don't think we need to worry about PCs just yet, right? Because they're the devices that receive all of this. So, but servers, we can control that now. We should start working on that, changing them to green hosting. Abu Dhabi entities that use green web hosting, I can't give you real examples. I don't know of. That's why we're having this very, very new pioneering conversation here, so that you can be one of the first that say so. And a key thing here is that when you do become green hosted, there are badges that you could put in the footer of your website that say, hey, we use green hosting. So again, something that you can immediately be recognized for. It seems that these are technical design and SEO page optimization best practices. Yes, they really involve that. I mean, we're not denying it. We're not shying away from the fact that actually optimization practices are huge. They're instrumental to being sustainable. So apart from where it's being powered, how it's being designed, and thinking about the users and how it's being coded are huge parts of sustainability. It's a byproduct, right? So absolutely, but people don't place a lot of, it's great that you're kind of placing an importance on it, but you'd be surprised at how little people kind of put that at the forefront of their KPIs. Can we have a copy of this presentation? Yeah, I'll leave that for the ADCCI team to kind of come back to you and verify. Are we going to disseminate this? Maybe they'll let you know in a minute. I think probably yes. How to investigate if a company is greenwashing? Well, so the thing is, it's easy to say we do this and that, but how do they back it up? Do they have real data? Are they, so for example, if you go on a website and they say we are sustainable, we're environmentally friendly, okay, go to their footer, have a look in their footer, look at the links that they have to on sustainability, on their positive environmental impact, read those statements, and then see if there's any certification or accreditation that they've kind of tried to receive. Even see if there's data, like they're saying, we saved this much, we did this much. Like you can read between the lines, you can see if people are making an effort. I mean, they could blatantly lie, of course, but that's why there's the third-party audits. But if they're talking about data in a very sort of tangible way, so they're saying we saved X amount by doing this or that, we worked with this organization, we offset. So let's talk about offsetting really quickly. I mean, offsetting is a big thing, right? So there's your carbon emissions, how much you created in carbon, but then there's efforts to offset that. So what do I mean by that? So if you're producing a high amount of carbon emissions as an organization, you can partner up with organizations that are building more trees or doing reforestation or doing efforts, marine efforts, ecological efforts, and you donate and you give money towards that so that they can create more kind of greener ecosystems that help negate the emissions that you're creating, right? So look at if companies are doing offsetting as well. That's how you can invest that. If you're using Copilot, your cost goes up. Your cost goes up tremendously. Oh, okay. You're answering someone's question. Thank you. Where's your company's server located? Good question. So for green hosting, we use Google Cloud, which uses partial renewable energy and offsets the rest. And actually, in the next couple of years, is going to be 100% renewable. But the little bit that that is non-renewable still is being offset. We use particular servers within the Google Cloud platform that are 100% renewable energy. They're already using green energy only. But at the same time, there are servers that are sitting, for example, in India. There are servers now we've got servers in Saudi. So now there's a localized Middle Eastern server dedicated to the region, which I think is amazing because then we can, host all the websites there. But if you're more conscious about using servers that are 100% renewable energy and not offsetting at the moment, then we would host them on further servers. But it doesn't really matter where your company's server is located because it's being cached. There's a CDN that sits in the middle and it's caching and saving that data and then just transmitting it to specific regions. So even if your data is all saved in Finland, let's say, all right, or in France, it's the data is also being kind of temporarily saved on a cache CDN closer to the UAE or in the UAE and being disseminated there. So data is moving really quickly, right? But if you care about where your data sits, there are servers in the Middle East, which are in Saudi. For hardware, there's definitely a limit or standard. A system from 10 years ago would be using more power for less output than today. Of course, right. ARM systems are way more efficient. Absolutely. And that's thinking about the ecosystem, which is fantastic. That's part of combating greenwashing, moving towards a more sustainable environment and ecosystem as an organization. And that's fantastic. I really hope everyone thinks the way you do, because it's not just about the website, it's about everything else that powers the website, right? And powers the grid and powers your devices and powers your servers. So thank you for that. Are there sustainability equivalent available to online akin to VeriSign? Not yet. We're working on it. But what you can look at are what's called web sustainability guidelines. They're still in draft mode. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat. It's a draft right now, but it's an interesting piece of content. And you can see how we're working on this at the moment. Okay, so it's going up to the YouTube channel. That was the answer to that question. Okay, I think that was it for the Q&A in the chat. Yes, so W3C is king, absolutely. So W3C is the organization that has come up with all the web accessibility guidelines that have now become regulation, right? So I'm part of this group now that's working with the W3C or community to create web sustainability guidelines that follow in the footsteps of web accessibility. So, this conversation that we're having today is very much ahead of the curve. In terms of, creating a brand around it, giving web sustainability an identity. Going back to that person who was saying, well, this is all a lot about optimization. Yes, it is, but let's give that the right sort of cover and branding and casing to make to identify it as actually a green effort, an environmentally positive effort. So all these things tie together, and eventually this is going to become law. And I hope it does. And that's the aspiration. But let's do it now from an ethical perspective, right? Let's do it now from our duty towards our investors and our consumers and the environment. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to me today, and for coming along to the Abu Dhabi Chambers session. Really, really appreciate your time. I don't think that with web sustainability, there's a huge gap between it and profit. I think consequently, you will reap the rewards of being sustainable, and that increases your revenue because it increases your traffic footfall, it increases your loyalty, it increases so many other things that could increase your revenue. So being sustainable has other consequently amazing things. So it's kind of your return on investment is so high with being sustainable because you're doing so many other things, right? Anyway, thanks everybody. Really appreciate your time today. Love doing this with you, and we hope we can come back and have more in-depth conversations around actionable things and implementation. Please reach out. Please fill the form. Hit that QR code and the link, and come to me and come to us really with any questions you may have, and we can have a conversation as well, one-off, and go into more depth about anything that you may want to learn more about. I'm going to hand it back to I think to Omar to close us off.
Thank you so much, Farah, for the amazing presentation. Very valuable information and insights. Thank you guys for your time and for attending this workshop by Abu Dhabi Chamber in collaboration with Hertech. See you soon in more workshops and more valuable presentations about the digital sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.